All right. Well, first, good morning. So here's what we've learned so far. Um, we know how to do some DOM manipulation. We know how to like find, create, change elements, kind of like update things on the DOM, remove them, kind of CRUD in the DOM. We also know how to work with events now. We know like what an event is. We know how to listen for events. We know how to say, cool, when an event happens, you can even get access to the information about the event and you can do something, whether that's DOM manipulation or anything else. And so we've tied two of these three things together. Some questions that got brought up yesterday were like, that's cool, we're using this form, like why, like what about data? What about persisting it? All that fun stuff. And so that's what we're going to learn about today, kind of interacting with your servers. So what I want to talk about really quick is, so we know this stuff conceptually. We're going to keep practicing it and getting better at it. I'm sure that there's a lot of things in both of these kind of camps that are just like, what? I'm confused still. We're going to continue to practice them, but I'm going to give you the third tool. And the rest of the week is just putting all three of these things together and practicing it. And part of like becoming a great programmer and kind of getting intuition for code is just like messing with it. It's just like doing work and just be like, oh, that's how that worked. I see. So we're just going to spend a lot of time doing that after today. Cool. So what I want to do is, before we get started, we had another thing that was pointed out is like, what about the fact that we're repeating ourselves in our templates and things like that, which I'll review in more detail, but we're going to dry up our code using functions. I'm also going to walk through the difference between implicit and explicit return. This is something you have not seen in Ruby, and it works differently in JavaScript, so I'm going to break down the difference. And I'm also going to start to make a change to replace this function, the way that you write functions here, with something called an arrow function. There are different ways to write functions. I'm going to just show you the difference between these two. I am not going to get into crazy technical detail on the difference. I will do that next week. Cool, but anytime I write function from now on, I'm going to be writing it like this. So after we do that, we're going to understand how we persist data to our web app. We're going to review the REST convention. We're going to understand what the heck fetch is and what it's for. Understand what the heck a promise is, what it's for. How you use them using something called .then. Walk through synchronous versus asynchronous. And then we're going to use fetch to make one request and kind of like put all these concepts into action to build another feature on our app. Cool. Any questions on any of that? Let's get started. So our app so far. So I did a little bit of work on this thing, and we have a nicer styling, all that fun stuff we had before, the ability to hug. We can add our own compliments now. I don't think we need to really review this one. Does anyone want me to review the trash can again, like how you delete? All right. I added the ability to favorite. I'll post the video up later, but I'll review that really quick. And then I also, just because why not, I replaced all the cute cats with random Nicolas Cage GIFs. I don't know if you know who Nicolas Cage is. If you do, I'm sorry. If you don't, I'm also sorry. So there's just like how there's place, oh, I already saw it. All right, so just like there's place kitten is where I got all those cute images. There's a bunch of placeholder image websites. This one is called Place Cage. Place Cage, and yeah, you can use GIFs or crazy ones or gray or some more chill Nicolas Cage. I didn't know that was fun. That's really funny. And all you do is change the size, just like Place Kitten. Okay, goodbye. Anyways, that is Placekeeps. There's a bunch of these placeholder image websites. So I might use another one tomorrow. We'll see. Cool. So this is the one I have now. I just used the GIF version. And this is the site we had before. Just instead of cats, we have Nicolas Cage. And every time I refresh, it's new Nicolas Cage GIFs. Yep. And I added one more feature. So, we can delete still. We can hug things. We can add nice hair, submit. All that works. And I added the ability to favorite. So that's what a favorite does right now. We're just like, yeah, Matt approves. And so that's all that works. I'm going to review favorite really quick, and then we're just going to get into drawing up our code, replacing functions, or drawing up our code, replacing any function definition with the word function with arrow functions. Then we'll get into fetch. Cool. Book. Okay. So here's what I did. So I also removed, there's like a bajillion compliments. The GIFs were taking forever to load. I have to load a GIF for every single image. So I only have a couple compliments now. I also have this random number method. Just what this is doing is I just made a really quick method that basically takes a min and a max and generates some random number by intervals of 10 so that I can get basically, so it's like any number between 400 and 500, like 410, 420, 430, and any number between 200 and 250. So I have like a random image every time on this website. So that's all this is doing. And so if you look here and you go to network and image, you can see each of these like 240, 220, 200, 240, 200, and like each one has like different dimensions, like 410 by 240, 400 by 220, 480 by 200. So that's how I'm just making them random. Not really important, just if you were curious. Cool. What I did is just like how we added a trash can here, I just added a star and I made the class favorite. And since we have that listener on the UL tag, and again, all of this information is in all our LIs, just like our button is in this LI, our trash can is in this LI, and our favorite is in this LI. The first common parent is our UL. So I can just add another event, like check for another case in our event listener. So all I did was add another else if, just like how we did event target class name trash. I just did if the event target, and I did it a different way. So this way is saying, and I can put a debugger in here, but this is a really cool way to check if there's multiple classes on an element. You could say if the event target class list, this is using class list instead of class name, this returns an array of all of our classes. If it contains the class favorite, then they'll turn true. And I just say, cool, it's true. Take the parent element, and I'll just put a debugger in so you can see it, and basically take the inner HTML, put a map parrot emoji at the top of it, and append what was already in there. So let's put a debugger in, you can see. So refresh if I favorite. And we go into our code. Let me just zoom that in. So right now I'm here. I'm in my UL tag event listener. I clicked, and this code said, is the event dot target, what is it? Oh, it's this favorite, but how do I know? I can say, well, check the class list and see if it contains favorite. Cool, it does. Does it contain trash? No, it doesn't. So that's how I'm checking. Clear? And then I'm just saying, take the event target, right? Go to the parent element, which is a whole LI, right here, this thing. Go to its inner HTML, which is just a string, and I'm just taking this string and I'm adding it to the top, and then adding back in the rest of the inner HTML. So this is equaling this string, see, and then plus what was already there. So that's how I'm adding this to the top. So when I press play, you can see there it is. If I look at my elements, and I see now at the top, there's an image. That's all that's happening. Cool. All right, any questions on that? Cool. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, let's say, for example, we already deployed this as a real app. How's the, I don't know, let's say the workflow for the real situation? Or let's say, for example, what happens if you have an app like this that is based on a lot of information that's being fetched from another place? And let's say, for example, that day, that page went down. It's going to crack your app. So how you in real life handle all that stuff?
Yeah, well, that's a long answer. If your app dies in Rails, your app also dies in real life. So there's a whole way to make sure your app doesn't die. I used to work at Amazon. We had like crazy systems to make sure that Amazon.com never goes down. But I'll do an Ask Me Anything on week 3, and if that's a topic you want to know more information on, or if anyone just wants to come up to me and ask me questions after like a lecture, I'm down for that too. Yep. Awesome. So let's go back and so cool. We have favorites done. I just wanted to review that, and I'll post a video of me building this too, my thought process. Great, and yeah, if anyone hates the Nicolas Cage gifs, I'm sure probably someone does. Sorry, I will probably change them tomorrow with a new placeholder image. So we switch it up again. So what we're going to do is I want to refactor a little bit. So this is like kind of what we have with our app. But we noticed, it was pointed out yesterday, like, we've got code repeating itself, and we want to dry that up. So let's do it. So specifically, it's like right here, right? This thing, this line, like this, we're like we copied this from here. And remember, when I updated one, I had to update the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry up at minimum this part of the code. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to make a function. And I like to try and be really explicit with my like variable names, like, and my function names. Like I said yesterday, one of the hardest things to do is as a developer, is to like be really good at naming your variables and your functions. As you saw yesterday, when we named a variable like an li. When we were in here, we were like, cool, we have like we were like current li tag. And we were like thinking this was an li. That will it'll just like mess with your brain if you don't name your variables in a easy to read or understand way. And the more you program, the more you'll know what I'm talking about. So let's do, I'll call this create complement card HTML, something like that. Whatever makes sense to you. This is just what I'm going to do. Cool. And let's paste this in. Cool. And in order to make this dynamic, what else do I need to do? And like what I mean is, like, for this to be useful to us, is there anything else I need to do to make this so I can just like make this HTML template like show up properly? Go ahead. Yeah, it's like we have this variable, like we're using it here. We're like, for each of these complements, put in the complement here. So we need to be able to pass it into our template. like this. Yeah. Or complement. There we go. Cool. So let's test this. So I just made a function. I just want to see what this does. Okay. Refresh. So there's our function, right? So remember, this is the definition of the function, and this is me calling the function, okay? So if I pass in a complement, you are cool. If I run this function, what do we think we're gonna get back? Any guesses? Go ahead. New card, awesome. Any other guesses? Go ahead.
We're going to create HTML, but we haven't used it yet. We haven't appended something.
Cool. So we're gonna create HTML. We're gonna make like a card. Cool. Ready? What? Undefined? I just like put my string in there. Why is it undefined? Yeah, we didn't return anything, I heard. So JavaScript, this is something that will trip you up because the first language you learn is Ruby. Ruby, by default, is implicit returns. So everywhere that you write anything, it just returns the last line. This is how Ruby works. In JavaScript, it's explicit return. So how to explicitly return something is you literally write the word return. Refresh. There we go. Now we are returning our string. This one is a little weird, this example, because this looks like it's multiple lines. It's actually all one line, but because of how these backticks work, you can just write one line on multiple lines. So it actually looks like this. Right? It's just one giant line. It's the same. It's just I format it so you can read it. So for example, if I were to comment that out, let's write hi. I'm going to try and call this, it's going to be undefined. I have to return something. Now it works. Cool. What if I were to what if I did that? What do you think is going to happen? Any guesses? Going to return the curly braces. Any other guesses?
You know, Marcus is going to be the first thing.
Cool. Zoom tight. Refresh. Yeah. So how return works is just whenever you type return, game over, function's done. Just return the first thing that happens. That's how return works. One other thing, I'm just going to, because it's going to happen. I'm 100% sure it's going to happen. Probably to every single person. You're going to be like, why isn't my stuff returning? I wrote a function. It's not behaving the way I want. And then you can ask yourself, what does this return? And if you're starting to hunt around, trying to like do some logic in your head, all you have to do is look inside the function and look for this word. If there's no word, it's not going to return anything. Cool. This is the magic word. This is explicit return, not implicit return like Ruby. So the difference in the language. Cool. So we have our template. Cool. You are cool. It's right there. It's working. So now we have a function that returns our string, right? Our HTML template. How do we use this? Any guesses? Raise your hand. Go ahead. Yeah. So can you show me, give me an example of where we would do that? Yeah, awesome. So let's let's remove this. What?
It's just gonna give you a string. I don't know if the browser will point out that it's a string and detect HTML.
Yeah, great thoughts, or great point. Let's do a little bit more diving into inner HTML for 1 second, because that'll be helpful. So I'm just going to revert this back. I'm just going to actually just open this back up. Beautiful hair. UL tag. So here's my UL tag dot inner HTML. This actually returns a string. Inner HTML doesn't return HTML. This is a string. So let's refresh. Okay, that one's weird. If I go here and I do UL tag inner HTML equals hi, right? If I look now in this just is a string hi inside of my UL, right? I'll just leave it here. But if I take this an li, hello, right? Check it out. This was just the string hello with an L and the string li. This is not HTML. This is a string that looks like HTML. And I assign it to my UL tags inner HTML. What inner HTML does for us is it goes, I know what that looks like. That is an li, and it turns it into HTML for you. That's what inner HTML is doing. It renders just like how the DOM takes your string from the server that we had before, like all of your HTML, like here, this whole thing, just like how it takes all of this and turns it into the DOM. Inner HTML says, hey, anything that looks like HTML, I will turn into HTML for you. That's how inner HTML works. So that's why we can make a string template like this, pass it in here, because this is actually all this is. This is just a string too, and it's just concatenating strings together over and over, and it turns it into HTML for us. Cool. So all we're doing now is passing our complement into our string, like create complement card HTML template maker. It'll return the string. And let's see if it works. Yep, everything still works great. And is there anywhere else where we could use this function? Go ahead. Yes, exactly. Right here. See, we have the same template, same exact template. And all we have to do now is delete it. Oops. Use our function. Take the complement that we found in here and put it in. And so now, if I add nice hair, there we go. It works. Everything still works fine. Our app still works. Everything works. Cool. Any questions on that? So the purpose of this is to dry up our code. And this is like, for me, it's a little easier to read. You're like, okay, cool. UL tag, I'm getting its inner HTML. I'm creating a complement card HTML. I'm passing in my complement, and I'm concatenating the rest of what was in my UL tag. Same here. I am going through each complement, and I'm taking my inner HTML from my UL tag, and I'm just creating a complement card HTML with each of these complements, which is returning the string, and just adding them together over and over and over. Cool. So we have dried up our code, talked about implicit versus explicit return, and now we're going to go through our code and replace any function definition that's like this with an arrow function. You're going to see both on the internet all the time. I'm going to explain in detail next week all the technical differences between these two things. But you're gonna see this a lot, so I'm gonna start writing with the arrow function from now on. Cool. So let's start with what we just made. We made this nice template. Let's copy this. Actually, I'm just gonna comment it out. Not yet, but I'll say, okay, instead of writing function, you can write like a variable. So I'm gonna say const, I'm just gonna call it the same thing and I'll comment the other one out. Create complement card HTML. So this is a const because we're never going to change this function, right? So it's like, here we go, we have a variable and we're gonna assign it to an arrow function. So this is what an arrow function looks like. And so you have the same brackets right here. Instead of writing function, you just have this arrow. And instead of naming it right after function, you name it with a variable. And where you pass in complement is the same spot. You just have these parentheses. You just put it right here. And then the inside is the exact same. Copy, paste. Save. I'm going to comment this one out. Cool. Let's test it out. Yep, everything still works. Everything still works. Awesome. You're going to see variations on what this looks like. So you can pass in multiple arguments here. If there's only one argument, you don't even need the parentheses. You'll see that. Let's test it. Still works. Cool. Great. So I'm going to put the parentheses back in for now. Just looks more familiar. But this is how an arrow function works. And from now on, I'm only going to be using arrow functions. So let's see. Anywhere where we have a function. Function. Oops. So we have one here, one here, one here. Delete the word function, add an arrow. Done. Delete the word function, add an arrow. Done. Delete the word function, add an arrow. That's it. Everything still works. Delete still works. This still works. Like still works. This part still works. Right, everything works. Cool. Yeah, so for example, you'll see it like this. You'll see sometimes people just write if it's one thing, you'll see them write it like this. Cool. Any questions on arrow functions? Go ahead.
So when you're calling it again, you use the old notation, or does it matter?
What do you mean?
So you see how you made it a constant?
Yeah.
But like everywhere we're calling it with the, like how you would do a function call normally. So, and I notice it still works.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like say if you took off the complement name, would it still work?
Great question. Yeah, let's try it. So what you're saying is, let's go to console. You're like here, if I just like remove this, it works the exact same as normal functions. There's still the function definition versus like calling the function, right? Right, it works the exact same. So as far as using the function, nothing changes. 0 things change in using it. Go ahead.
So is there actually like a style guide for the arrow function?
What do you mean?
Like a general way to do it? Because let's say, for example, I'm reading your code the first time.
Yep.
I found something like that, I can get confused.
Yep.
Because it doesn't have the parentheses on it. I don't know if it's actually a parameter that you're passing from the function.
Yep.
So I can see that this thing, reading it the first time can be confusing.
Yep, yep.
So is there like a style guide to actually do it in a general way?
So something that exists in JavaScript are opinions and different companies that have different style guides. General style, what I do most of the time when I'm not teaching it is like one argument. I don't put parentheses. Multiple arguments, I put parentheses. And there's other things that I'll get into later with arrow functions, but for right now, if adding parentheses helps you, add a parenthesis. There's not a right way. Cool. And the reason I'm showing you both is because you'll see both. There will be people on the internet who write them with parentheses, people who don't.
Yeah, I'm just seeing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something new can be like,
I can forward you, for example, I think Airbnb has a pretty good style guide. As like no, they have one for JavaScript as well. Yep. And other companies that are pretty, I think are well respected in the tech community that have like pretty good style guides. So, yep. All right. So, great question. So I am all done with this stuff. I'm going to get into fetch now. Any questions on any of the things we've learned before we get started? Anything that was fuzzy, I just went over. Okay, time for the final piece of the puzzle. So what we've been doing right now is do you remember in mod 1 before you learned active record and you're building like Ruby apps where like you run the file, you can do stuff like, and then once you close the app, all your information's cleared and you don't save anything. That's what we've been doing so far. It's cool, it's great, it's important to know how these things work, but now we're gonna pair it with how to basically talk to our server and how to persist all this information. So that's the final part that we're gonna talk about. And I'm gonna show you a couple mental paradigms, like mental things to think about, and I'm gonna show you the technologies that we're gonna use in order to connect everything together and to save our information. Cool. So, who remembers what REST is? One hand, cool. A couple of hands, yeah, everyone, hopefully. So, what is REST? Can someone explain it to me in plain English? Cool. Yeah. Any other thoughts as well? Go ahead. Yeah. It's all good. So we've got like a convention that makes your code more readable. We've got like the has to do with routing. Any other thoughts? Go ahead. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So those are all parts of REST. I agree. Let's go through just real quick. I'm gonna go to a website. I don't know if you've been to this or seen it. Restular. Cool. So this is like the standard one. So what is the thing that we've been doing? Like we have like our app does like has compliments, right? That's like just a list of compliments. So I want to start to interact with our compliments in a RESTful manner. And I'll start to show you what I mean. Right, so if we look at compliments, here's the RESTful way. If we were in Rails, you would be like, getting all my compliments, right? Like how REST works is it like maps like all the things that everyone said was right. Like it's a convention that's really standard, so everyone understands how to use an app the same way and the routing the same way. But what it does is it actually kind of maps like this is like some concept. In Rails, it's like a class and objects, but we're gonna have like all of our compliments and listing them all out. So we say a HTTP verb plus a path is a route. So this route says, give me all of my compliments. This route says, show me a form so I can like create compliments. This route says post to compliments, which says create a new compliment. get a specific complement by passing the ID, gets that one complement. Updating, you say like put to the complement's ID, update a specific complement, and delete complement's ID, deletes a specific complement, right? That's like the standard that you're used to. We're going to use the same exact convention, but we're going to interact with APIs instead of like Rails, HTML, and like front ends. So I'll show you how we're going to do that. Go ahead.
So the way JavaScript manage the backend, like the way we're gonna see it now, is still the same concept model being controlled?
Yes, yes. So we're going to separate a couple things out, but I just want to tie in your knowledge, what you know now, to what you're going to start to use. So let's, so I did some more work. I made a complementer API. So at the end of next week, you're going to have this skill set. You're going to be able to make an API from scratch. Should be really cool. And so what this is it's a Rails app. So if you look over here, I Rails est complementer API, right? You know how to do all this stuff. And instead of like, so it's a Rails app, but instead of like HTML, I cut the head off. So the view is not HTML anymore, no more ERB files, none of that stuff. And instead, if I do my RESTful route, give me all complements, right? It is JSON, just an API. So, and I'll explain this in a little more detail later, but basically the same convention that you're used to here, the couple caveats, it's the same thing you're going to use here, right? You're going to say, give me complements. So for example, what if I wanted to get, just get our time together as like a nap? It never lasts long enough. How would I do that? If I wanted to see one thing. Go ahead. Exactly. You implicitly start to know this, right? Because you've been practicing it for like 3 weeks. Cool, right? Same stuff. Instead of HTML, just get JSON, right? That's it. So we're going to use this convention, this REST convention, and we're going to start to interact with our JavaScript DOM manipulation, event handling, and we're going to add in and communicate with an API that's RESTful to like tie everything together and start to save it. Cool? Tomorrow, I'll get into more details on how they're different, but I wanted to start to like tie everything together that you already know today. So let's talk about fetch. Okay, anyone have any idea what fetch is? Go ahead.
I think fetch just sort of grabs the JSON or the data from the API and brings it sort of to where you are locally so that you can see that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Yep, I like it. Awesome. I agree. So do you remember, maybe not, we'll see. Do you remember oh, you didn't do the Star Wars API stuff. Ah, never mind. So one of the things that you've used maybe in the past is like a REST client. So like in Ruby, you can just make API calls to some API. You can get information back. So it's the same thing we're going to be doing. So all we're doing here is we have like a tool that just says exactly like what both of you articulated. Hey, I'm going to, from my front end, from my website, from my index like .js, from my front end, I'm going to just make a call to a server and get my information back so I can do something with it. And it's basically my interface. Fetch is your interface to like talk to servers. That's what the technology is for. Go ahead.
So that means that's talking from the administration side.
What do you mean by that?
I'm the guy that made the developer, so all this thing that is happening on the admin side, because the user is not gonna do this.
Yeah, yes, you're right.
So my question is that I'm just doing requests.
Yep, it's the same process. So it's the same stuff that you've been doing. It's just, and we're gonna look at the code in a second and play with it. But all it is, a really crappy laptop, and here's my server. And all I'm doing right? This is my request. So I ask my server. This is actually a Rails app for now, or it could be any type of app, but it's all going to follow the RESTful convention. And we're going to get back in our response. Like JSON. That'll be like complement. So this is the same process. Like nothing's changing here. You're just, instead of, you're gonna like make this request using fetch. And this is like the tool that you use to make this request. So it will make the request, it will handle the response. And it's all gonna be on in the website, and I'll show you how that works. Okay? So, before I do that, yeah, let's do that right now. So before, yeah, let's do this exact request. So in Rails, how would I make that request, right? We go back to RESTuler, you're like, I want every single complement. You say get all the complements, right? That's how you, like normally that'd be the index in a Rails app. So same thing. We'll just take this local host 3000 complements, and I'm going to refresh my app, and I'm going to write fetch. And normally, all this does is by default, it'll make a GET request to this, and it will return something called a promise, and then we'll eventually get our response back. So literally the tool, it just looks like this, and I'll show you how to get our response in a second. Before I do that, I want to cover a couple concepts. So yeah, it just said, it like gave me back a promise. That's confusing. So what is a promise? Anyone have any thoughts? Any guess? Go ahead. Absolutely. That's exactly what a promise is, even in code. Yeah. Cool. When you tell somebody you're going to do something, you should do it. Or at least tell them why you didn't do it. One of the two. Yeah. So a promise is the exact same thing. Before I get into these any further, I actually want to talk about this sync versus async. So synchronous versus asynchronous. So all this stuff works pretty much the same way you're used to, with one major difference, and that is synchronous versus asynchronous. So real life examples of what I mean when I say synchronous and asynchronous, because those are like whatever kind of words at first in coding. So synchronous versus asynchronous. When I'm getting ready in the morning, right? I get up, I take a shower, I'm showering. That is synchronous. I'm not doing anything else. Like maybe some people do, I don't. I just shower and then I'm showering, done. Get out of the shower. That was synchronous. I didn't do anything. I just like did that one thing, then I do something else. Asynchronous. Say I'm still getting ready in the morning and I put on I go to my coffee maker and I start my coffee maker, right? No, normally I don't just like say my coffee maker's right here. I don't like start it and I'm just like not doing anything else, just waiting till it's done. Cool. Normally what people do is they start their coffee maker and they go do other crap. Like maybe I start my coffee maker, then I shower, then when I get out, I'm like, cool, my coffee's done, it looks done, grab it, something like that. Making the coffee, that process, that is asynchronous, right? It happens in the background. You're not just like waiting for it. You start it, you're like walk around, you're doing something else, and then it happens asynchronously in the background in your life. And when it's ready, you go grab your coffee. Same idea with text messaging, right? Text messaging, most of the time, asynchronous, right? You don't like text someone most of the time, and then you're just like waiting for a response, like no one talks to me, please God, wait, come on. You know, like that will be synchronous, right? Most of the time, you don't text synchronously. Maybe sometimes you do. Most of the time, you send text asynchronously, right? You text someone, and you like put your phone away, you do something, and eventually, ding, and you're like, okay, cool. Like that is asynchronous. It happens in the background. You're not waiting on it. You do something, and you wait for that response. Cool. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah, it's like a weird. I just want to relate it to like real life concepts right away because I think that like helps my brain be like, cool. Basically, when you're waiting and you're not doing anything else that's synchronous, when you can do something and let it run in the background, and when it's ready, then you do something. That's asynchronous. So again, waiting on my coffee, is that asynchronous or synchronous? Like if I just start my coffee and go do other stuff, is that asynchronous or synchronous? Asynchronous, yes. If I am in the shower and I'm just showering and then finally I'm done and I go do the next thing, is that asynchronous or synchronous? Exactly, cool. Not gonna make that analogy. Okay, skip. Great, I think that makes sense. So now, how we handle, so synchronous code is what you've been doing since day one. Everything you've done in Ruby, everything you've like been used to, your paradigm has been synchronous code, right? Just wait, then do the next thing, then do the next thing, then do the next thing. Now, we're adding a new paradigm, which is asynchronous coding, okay? So how asynchronous code works in JavaScript, the technologies we're going to be using to do this, first is fetch, and fetch returns this concept called a promise. Okay, so fetch communicates with our server, and this happens asynchronously. And in JavaScript, how we handle asynchronous things are with promises. This is one of the main ways. This is the way we're going to like learn. This is the purpose of a promise. And like what you said, like what is a promise? Well, you said you're going to do something, right? Like that's what a promise is. And it's the same in code. It returns like a promise that says, hey, you clicked that coffee maker, right? Like fetch, like you can think of like fetch as like you like started the coffee maker. It returns a promise that's like at some point I'll let you know when your coffee's ready so you can go get it and drink it. That's the point of a promise. How we code with promises, how we use them, is with a dot then. So promise, fetch returns a promise, and you can call dot then on any promise. So I'll show you the syntax, but the idea is like, go to my server. Can you give me all the compliments as JSON, please? And it's like, cool, I'll return you a promise. And I promise that when this process is done, I'll let you know. And you're like, cool, thank you. And it's like, just tell me what to do next and I'll do it. So that's where the then comes in. So you say, request returns a promise. Then when this is done, do something else. Okay? So let's code it. So see, this returned a promise, and you can see it's like there's a status, there's like resolved, there's pending, there's like maybe it didn't work, and you've got the promise value, which I'll explain in a second. So this is our request, and we can I'll just call it a request. Request equals, cool. So request, that's a promise, right? Then I'm gonna use my arrow function, right? This is again the same thing as writing function, right? Then, so my request, then when this is done, grab the response. Cool. So I just console logged my response, right? So this is my, this is like the standard stuff. So you make a request with fetch. When that's, so it returns a promise. When that's done, when the request is done, then give me the response. That's how this works. So same thing, request, response, same stuff. And here's my response. So let's look at it. It's got headers, just like a normal response had. It's got a status, 200, it succeeded. It's got the URL that it came back from. It's got body, all that stuff, right? That's kind of similar to what you've seen before when you do requests and responses. This is how you do it asynchronously. Go ahead.
What's the meaning of the redirect? Why is false?
Don't worry about that right now. Yeah, that's more about like how HTTP works. Yeah, go ahead.
So response is just a keyword, or that's a variable?
It's a great point. Let's try it again. Refresh. I don't know. Hi. Oops, I didn't make a request. Refresh. Make the request, right? It returns a promise. Then, when this request is done, get the response and console log it. Same thing. It's just a variable. I'm just using that variable so that you can see this is what's happening. So I just want to be really clear about what's happening. And in general in code, it's really great to just like, here's what's happening. I'm just going to make a variable so it's like real clear for anyone to know. Yep.
Does anything other than response ever go into that? As an argument?
Here?
Yeah.
Yep, let's check it out. So response. So here's what's cool about asynchronous code using promises. You can make basically multiple promises. And so each time that you want to do something and you want to like do it asynchronously, you can say something like this. Cool, I got a request back, or I got a response back, right? So I made a request. Step one, made a request to my compliments thing right here, compliments. Here's all my compliments. Step two, when this is done, so this happens in the background, just kind of like your coffee maker. Start your coffee maker. When that's done, the promise is going to call then, and it's going to say, cool, I'm going to give you back the response. So that's what we were console logging. This is just a request response cycle, just done in the background. Then, call it that. Okay, so you can call another then. So what happens is you say, once this request is done, then give me the response. This response is a string, right? JSON is a string. Technically, this is string-like, but don't worry about that right now. For all intents and purposes, just think of this as a string. And you're going to call .json on it. So here's like the purpose of each of these. So first, go to this, give me all the compliments that are in my API. When you're done, then take the response, which is a string, and turn it into JavaScript. That's what this does. So just like in Ruby, when you take JSON, you have to like turn the JSON into Ruby. Like you need to turn it into hashes and arrays and numbers and things like that, because it's just a string. You need to do the same thing in JavaScript. So this is what this step is right here. That's what that's for. Okay? When that's done, then take this parsed JSON, which is now your JavaScript, and let's see what it is.
In that line, that return response.json, basically JSON at that moment is like a method of that object.
Yes, that's exactly what that is.
That's why it has the parentheses.
Yes, exactly. This is a response object. And one of the methods that's on a response object is, hey, if it's JSON, turn it into JavaScript. That's what this method does. Awesome. And now look, console logged, parse JSON, check it out. We've got our API coming back in JavaScript, right? In the background, nothing here changed, right? Like this, I could still be liking stuff. I could do whatever I want here. The user doesn't know, doesn't care. This is happening in the background. And when it's ready, then it lets us know. It's the power of asynchronous programming. Go ahead. Yep. This one? Great question. So let's keep playing. So if I refresh, so I'll make the request again. So this. Cool. Ready? Now it's a poop. So how these work, I'll just keep messing with them, but how this works is whatever you return from the previous promise, you have access to right here. So yeah, so let's keep messing with it. So refresh again. Here we go. Cool. Very long variable name, but I'm just doing it like because it's like, okay, this is whatever the last promise. So what we're doing here is we're doing promise chaining. So we're saying this request returns a promise. Dot then returns a promise. Then you can call dot then on that promise. And this returns a promise. And you can call dot then on that promise, which returns a promise. And you can call dot then on that promise, which returns a promise. And then dot then on that promise, which returns a promise. The point of this is to take all these asynchronous tasks that are happening in the background and say, I don't know when they're going to be done. I don't know if it's 5 seconds, a millisecond, 10 minutes, who knows? Just let me, like when they're done, then go do the next thing. When that's done, then go do the next thing. And then when that's done, go do the next thing. And how you get access to when things are done, just whatever the last promise returns, you have access to as the argument here. It's like passing like a chain, like a baton. Like this is my baton, and I'm like passing it in to the next thing, passing it in to the next thing. Go ahead.
Could you access that? This is one of the last promise returned. I think it's an array. Can you access that outside of the chain?
No.
Is
No.
it array set so you can...
That gets hairy. It gets a little fuzzy. So like you're saying, like, can I access it in the global scope? There are ways you can do that. Yes. What we're going to worry about for right now is just like accessing it in this. These are callbacks, right? Like this is just when this thing happens, then run this function. That's all that this is doing. And anytime we want to mess with any of that data, we're just going to do it in that callback, in this then. There are ways to do it, but because it's asynchronous, the only time we can count on this actually having what we need is when this returns. You know what I mean? Like if I was like trying to say, hey, I want all this list of complements and trying to run code, assuming that all my complements are there somewhere else, that won't work. And like I only know that I have my complements once I get to this then.
So if you wanted to do anything with that data, you'd have to do it.
Yeah. 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 As we do more advanced stuff, I might show you like other things, but for all intents and purposes, when you need to use complements now, you do it there. Yep. Cool. Go ahead.
If you have like multiple requests, would you make like a different file for each request?
You'd make a different fetch for each request.
So you have multiple fetches on one file?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. Tomorrow we'll do, just like we did DOM CRUD, tomorrow we'll do fetch CRUD. And there's gonna be a bunch of fetch like labs that we already deployed, and you'll just keep doing more like work on those. But we'll do like basically full CRUD, and we'll have like a real app tomorrow. We'll build it all out. Saves, does everything. Cool. So, for example, if I return hello, what is this going to be? Hello. If I return 8, what is this going to be? The number 8, right? This is console logging. Whatever I return from the last promise, I have access to as an argument in the next promise. So again, how this works is I get my response back, and I say response.json, and that returns all of my data. Cool. And I just was calling this parse JSON. You can call it whatever makes sense to you. Another technique I use that's pretty common for me is I call this since I know that this is a list of complements, I just call this complements. I'm like complements. Right, it doesn't matter what I call it. This just helps in my brain. Oh, this is all my complements. Cool. Here's each one. Make sense? Cool. So this is how we do asynchronous code. This is the final piece of the puzzle. There's going to be a lot more JavaScript stuff in your future, but these are like the 3 pillars of like how to communicate with the servers, how to do DOM manipulation, how to do event handling. I'm going to use this now to do some refactoring. So right now, right, I could delete everything in here, refresh, it's all back. Not the bees, it's all back, right? So it doesn't save any likes, doesn't save favorites, none of that stuff. Doesn't save if I add nice hair. This is not in my database. Refresh. So that's like, it's just like our apps from mod 1 before we did active record. So now I'm gonna like bring it all together. Before I do that, any questions on fetch? On the asynchronous stuff we just went through. Okay. We have 20 minutes let's do this. So I think we went through all this. We just have fetch, making a GET request and adding our new information to our web page. So in here, there's a couple things I want to do. So right now, I'm dynamically making all of my compliments from this, right? I have an array of compliments. I'm saying, go through all my compliments, and for each of my compliments, get my UL tag and concatenate a new LI template onto what's already there over and over. Like return the inner HTML and add a new compliment card to it each time for each of the compliments. That's how we're doing this right now. So I want to use the same code for like the DOM manipulation and event handling part, but I want to start to persist my data, right? Like I don't want to use a hard-coded array anymore. So goodbye. Knowing what we know now about communicating with our server, conceptually, what do you think we need to do? Who wants to take a stab at this? Go ahead.
We take the JSON and make that our array.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. Like we were just playing with here, right? You're like, cool, I have an array of compliments now from my server. I need to use that somehow, right? I need to loop through this and get all of our compliments. So a couple things are different. One, we have a different structure. Before I had an array of strings. Now, because I made this a little bit more complicated, I need to save this information back and forth. So I need to save things like, is it favorited or not? What's the message? When we're messing with databases, we need an ID, right? We need to know like which element we're going to do edit or get or do anything. And also, what is our hug count, right? Like I want to save that information. Make sense? Cool. Yeah, see they have different hug counts and all that stuff. So let's go through and do it. So what I'm going to do, also going to just like get this out of here for now. So here is I'm just going to move this down here. Cool. Doesn't really matter. Just getting our functions defined up here. Oh yeah. I'm going to refactor this one too. Const equals arrow function. Same thing. All right. So now we have this code, compliments. This is not anything. I just deleted the array. This what like if I run this code now, everything breaks. Compliments is not defined because I deleted my array of compliments. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask the server, yo, give me all the compliments from our RESTful route / compliments, a get / compliments. So fetch, copy this, paste, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you, like what you're doing right now, do you have routes already set in your API?
Yeah, I'm going to show you really quick. So this is, 48, like we did. So you'll learn this at the end of the week, at the end of next week, but just kind of give you a little taste of it. What does this look like? It's a Rails app. Same stuff you know. Go into app, right? Go into controllers. Looks super familiar. Compliments controller. I have get compliments. Just doing compliments. It's like the same stuff. Just instead of returning HTML, I'm returning JSON.
That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to ask you, so you're basically, you are fetching from your local host HU.
Yes.
But that means that you made a file .json with all the information already.
Yeah, it returns JSON. Yep. Don't worry.
You can just make a file and fetch the information there, right?
yeah, don't worry about this right now. This is how it's working. All this is a Rails app with the HTML cutoff and JSON returning. So that's all it is. It's just MVC, same stuff. Don't worry about it right now. But it looks the same. Like you're gonna pick this up really quick. So yeah, all this is a Rails app, same routes, same everything, right? Like if you go to the routes, resources, complements, same exact code that you know. So back to this, going to complements. So that's step one. I'm like, hey, cool, in the background, give me my complements. And I can either save this as like my request, or I can just call it right here and say then. And you can write it all in one line. I just write it on multiple lines like this. This is just a convention. So I say then, response, response.json, right? So this is saying, hey, go to my server. Then when you get back your response, give that to me, and I'm going to turn it into JavaScript. Should write it like this on purpose first. Okay, cool. Then when that's done, now that I have like my JavaScript, then give me my complements. And like use them to do something, right? So for now, let's just console log complements. Cool. Let's just see if this works. Let me also just comment this out for now. Let's just see if this works. We're getting undefined. This is undefined. Why do we think that this is undefined? We should have gotten our complements. We just did this in the before. Go ahead. Because I console logged it. Yeah, we've got a couple of things. Yeah, I heard return. What were you gonna say?
You return an array of caches, right?
I'm supposed to return an array. I'm supposed to return something that looks kind of like an array of objects, right? Go ahead.
Since you're in the first promise then, since you're using curly braces, it won't do an implicit return, so it needs to specify return.
100%. I didn't return anything from my first promise. So this is where the returns are going to mess with you. You need to explicitly return everything. So because I didn't return anything, this returns undefined. And this is what I got. I got undefined. So I need to make sure I return my response.json. Let's test it again. Cool. We have all our complements in our JavaScript file from our API. We're doing it. Right? This console log right here. We have complements. Cool. So how can I have this code and how do I put complements on the page? Say it again. Here? Like this? Let's try it. Seems like it might make sense. You've got it here, we're returning, then we might use it or something. Refresh. Uncaught reference error. Complements is not defined. Where is that? Right here. This is not defined. Okay. Go ahead.
You just need to assign the response to a variable, so you can actually use it.
All right, let's try that. So right now, we have these different hypotheses. You're like, if I return it, maybe now this has access to it. That it didn't. Like basically, when we're inside of this function, there's not scope to this, so we don't have access to this complements thing. So you're saying, what if we like make like something like that? That's what you're saying? So let's try that. Go ahead.
But you're not returning like an array of strings from the JSON. You're getting like an object. It's a hash with like an ID and all the different.
This is what we're getting.
Right.
An array.
But at first, didn't we just have the text? Is that
Yes.
what complements is referring to?
Yes.
So we need to take out the message and make an array of messages that then complements would call.
You mean in here?
No, I mean the complements for each below.
Yep.
If we don't give it an array of like text messages, it won't
Work. Yeah. You're totally right. Well, let's do that. Let's do that after we just get this started. But you're totally right. So let's just see if that works. You're saying like, oh, cool. Maybe I can like grab it here.
Yeah, no, but not like that. No, I'm saying that you were gonna assign the response of the whole fetch thing in a variable. You already know that it's returning an array.
This
Assign it to a variable.
here, like that.
Yeah, but then you have to take out why you creating a new array.
All right, cool. Let's do it. Let's see if that works. All right. Complements for each is not a function.
Now you need to check what is that.
One sec. So this returns a promise always. So these are all like interesting thought processes, but you're gonna start to try and like be like, okay, how do I get my synchronous brain to start thinking asynchronously? This isn't working. Blah. Go ahead.
So Paul, when you said return complements on line 28, get rid of that. And what we actually want to do is loop all the complements, and for each like, because it's an array, for each element we want to take out dot message, or we want to save that somewhere.
Like this, right? Okay, let's just.
Kind of, but if you just delete like after the for each and just put a debugger there, then we can see what it's returning.
I love it. Cool. So let's just comment this out. Put a debugger. Cool. So this is when people were asking, how do we use complements now that we get it back from the server? Because you're like, maybe if I return it, or maybe if I assign a variable or something, this is where the asynchronous and synchronous part can trip you up. Refresh. Cool. Our code is paused, right? It's paused. We made the fetch. So go to our server. When that gets done, when we get a response back, turn that response, which is a string, into JavaScript, which is an array of objects is what it turns it into. Cool. So now we have complements. Let's look at what this is. Well, actually, I would probably have to put debugger right here. So I'm going to refresh. My debugger's here. So let's look at our complement. See, it's an array of objects with these keys. Okay, that's what we get back. So step 1, ask for complements from the server. Step 2, take the response, which is a string, and turn it into JSON. Step 3, use that parsed response, which is now an array of objects. And what he was saying was like loop through them. For each of them, get the complement. So let's step in. There, we're in our loop. Love it. So complement. So these are each of our complements. We're going through each of them. This is this one. And you can see there's keys on it, right? One of them is complement.message. Crazy. So now all we have to do, I'm going to turn this debugger off. And I'm going to remove this debugger. And the same code that we had before, we're just going to add complement and get the message. Same stuff. It's from our server though, right? Here it is. I bet you make baby smile. Our time together is like a nap. I bet you make baby smile. Our time together is like a nap. If I go to the very bottom one. Fighting the clock with my dead battery. You have a really contagious laugh. See, now I'm laughing, and it's all your fault. And at the bottom, you have a really contagious laugh, right? It's all from the server. And we can know this. One other thing that's really awesome and important to know is our debugger tools are freaking cool. So we can go into our network tab. And we can filter. We can see all requests, but that might be overwhelming. So we can filter by, see it says XHR and fetch requests. And we can say, we made a request. Let's check it out. We went to get localhost 3000 compliments. And our response was this giant string of JSON. But if we want to preview it, the response, right, this is what we got back. So we made a request from our server. And then when it was ready, when when this came back, we said, cool. Then grab the response, turn it into JavaScript, go through, and now we have our compliments because we turned them as JavaScript. So it's an array of objects. So go through each of those, go through this array, go for each of these objects, do the same thing we were doing before, just add the key message. Got it? Before we go into anything else, this is a funky thing to start thinking asynchronously. We tried things like adding compliments like as a variable here. We tried to like return it, things like that. This is what I meant when I said we have to once it's ready, this is the only place we know it's ready for sure in this then. We say when this is all done, then attach all these compliments to our DOM and make HTML. That's the point of this then, and the point of a promise. Cool. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, but in this example, what I was trying to say before, do you really need to iterate through each one when you're trying to get?
Yes.
That's going to take this is not the proper way. What I was trying to say is if you have a variable, let's say for example you declare it on the top,
yep.
And just don't assign any value on it.
Yep.
So every time that you're calling the last response or the last then,
yeah.
Just assign that value, the whole JSON thing,
yeah.
into one variable.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. You can't do that. So that's the point. There's many ways you can do it.
Because I see this is going to take too long. If you've seen the under the hood, that would be not the proper way to do it. It takes too long going through each one, just getting the message. Because at the end of the day, I want to get the whole object. I just don't want to get the message. I want to be able to
are you
the whole file. You see what I'm saying?
Not fully. So are you saying pass in the complement here?
No, I'm just saying assign, create a variable.
Okay.
Let's call it a bold fetch that is called let complement, I guess. Just like that, just declare it.
Okay.
So then on the last then, you're going to assign the value that is being passed to that variable.
Yeah, so that doesn't work. Here's why that doesn't work. Really specifically, this whole thing, asynchronous, okay? If you want to use anything down here afterwards, that's synchronous. So let me show you an example, right? Let complement, cool? Let's say in here, I just assign complement. Actually, we won't even need to iterate. Let's just not iterate at all. Let's just say, cool, this is my compliments response, okay? Compliments, this is compliments, okay? And you're saying, when this comes back, do this, right? This is what you're asking. Cool? Let's do it. Console.log. Actually, let's put a debugger right here, right? So all this async stuff's done. Debugger. Cool? Ready? Refresh. Code is paused. I will walk through very slowly what I just did. you were saying, let's take this thing and set up a variable. And you're saying, theoretically, it would be great if I could just take this compliments thing, get the compliment response, and just assign it here, and then I can keep going on my merry way and using it, right? That's what you're saying? Awesome. So let's check out right now. So I'm past this code. All this async stuff, I'm past it, right? So let's check out what compliments is. Press escape. Compliments is undefined. Here's why. This is what I meant by your brain is in synchronous mode, and we need to switch from synchronous mode to asynchronous mode, which is going to be weird, and it just takes time to transition. So compliments, you define this here, right? How you've been coding is you say, then this runs, then this runs, then this runs, and I just keep going down synchronously. What I'm saying when I say asynchronous, this is a great point. When I say asynchronous, I say this runs, but it runs in the background asynchronously. It's like me starting my coffee, and I keep going. My code doesn't pause. I keep doing stuff. I would like try and call compliments right now before my response gets back, and it's going to be undefined. I'm waiting for my server to give me my response, right? This runs in the background. This is like if you don't use this then, right, and use your compliments response in here, then like you don't know when your server is done. You don't know when your coffee is ready, right? So what's happening in this code is like, and just to bring it back to the real world, I'm making a coffee, right? I start my coffee machine, and I just immediately pull my drink out, like pull my cup out, try to pour it in, and it's like, no, I didn't say I was ready yet. Like that's what's happening in the code. You need to wait until you get a response back. That's what the then is for. It will. So yeah, but the code just keeps running. Yeah.
But the variable's gonna work at the end of the day.
It's not the way you think. Yeah. So like now if I type in compliments, it's not working either because
Yeah, because the response hasn't finished.
all right, cool. We can talk about this offline because I want to make sure that everyone understands the concepts that we just went through. Yeah, see, so let's not go this route right now. Anyways, let's go back to what we were talking about, and then we're done. Sorry about that. So back to this. One more time. This is how we're doing it. Fetch. We're talking to our server, making a request to our Rails app, localhost 3000 compliments. When we get a response back, it's a string. So we turn it into JavaScript. When that's done, then we have our array of complement objects, and only then. And the way that we use it is in this callback, in this code. We say, now that everything's there and ready for us, go through each of the complements and do the same exact stuff we were doing, right? Just take our UL tag and like create new complements. Cool. All right, thank you.